Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Love and Gelato. Love and Gelato is an American romantic comedy based on the novel of the same name, and tells the story of Lena, a recent high school graduate and future MIT student who mourns the loss of her mother, but is convinced by her best friend to go on the trip of a lifetime to Rome to enjoy a summer vacation before she goes to college. When she arrives, she's well looked after by her mother's friends, who give Lena her mother's diary chronicling her own travels in Rome. This encourages Lena to discover the city the same way her mother did, while also finding herself involved in a few inevitable romances. This movie started off okay in the beginning, but its cliches and poorly written characters eventually built up to a point where it became irritating to watch. Its unique setting is a visual treat, and there are some things it gets right with its story, but most of it is overshadowed by its overall blandness. I liked Lena in the beginning because her actress plays the fish out of water character quite well. Her dorky persona was a nice change of pace from other cookie-cutter female leads in the rom-com genre, and her mother's death adds more dramatic nuance to her character as well. However, she tends to play up the geeky, introverted student type to a fault. Even as the story goes on and she supposedly gets more used to being in Rome, she'll frequently come up with excuses or reasons not to do something, often going into an annoying rant about how unsafe it is, so the progression with her comfort levels in Rome remains inconsistent. The angle surrounding her potential father can also be seen coming miles away. The movie tries to bait the audience into thinking who it really is, only to shift focus all of a sudden, and it's clumsy in the way it all proceeds. Even the way her father's identity is alluded to as X in her mother's diary doesn't make sense because her mother's words aren't written in a realistic manner. Things become more disappointing when the two love interests are introduced. The first one who's introduced is Alessandro, and he's about as generic as a rich kid with a domineering dad can possibly be. He offers nothing unique to the story, with his only reason for being attracted to Lena being that she, quote, makes him feel different, without explaining how. The two aren't convincing as a couple. They only go on 1 or 2 dates before their romantic subplot is dropped all of a sudden in favor of everything else surrounding Lena's father. Aside from this, they only share a few minutes of screen time together, which makes the already little amount of chemistry between them even more underwhelming. The other love interest, Lorenzo, is sort of better than Alessandro, if only because he's less obnoxious. His passion for cooking alone gives him way more depth by comparison, and his friendly personality made him more endearing as well, even though he's basically the pauper to Alessandro's prince. The romance between Lena and Lorenzo is much better than with her and Alessandro, but it's still ordinary. It plays out like pretty much every other romance out there, so much so that I honestly find it difficult to talk about at length, because it's just that boring. The movie advertises that there's supposed to be some sort of love triangle going on, with Alessandro and Lorenzo trying to get with Lena, but it's one of the laziest love triangles I've ever seen. Alessandro and Lorenzo only interact with each other once, and Lena spends an equal amount of time with both of them without necessarily going behind the other's back. Lena spends time with Alessandro, then they split. Lena spends time with Lorenzo, then they split too. Even though there's supposed to be a long-standing grudge between the two boys, there's no real tension that builds between them, and they never really compete for her attention either. In this regard, I did like that the male love interests had love lives of their own that they were pursuing away from Lena, so that they didn't make her their sole reason for existing as characters. But even so, the lack of interest and conflict between the boys vying for Lena's attention made the romance as a whole fall flat, and it doesn't help that the other girls the boys were with only served to cause drama. Lena's best friend Addie makes the situation even weirder. She is unusually invested in Lena's romantic success to a point where it starts to get really creepy, especially once Photoshop gets involved, and even when her actions are just played off for laughs, there's not much joy to be found behind them. The comedy in general is pretty weak. It mostly consists of slapstick involving food, Lena being forced out of her comfort zone in extreme ways, or the movie mocking Italians for being reckless drivers. There were some funny lines shared between the characters, but most of them remain overshadowed by the bad physical humor. When one gets past the comedy, the movie is almost painful in how formulaic it is. I know I tend to reference this idea more than I should, but it feels exactly like another bog-standard Hallmark Channel movie, with a slightly bigger budget and even more lazy writing. It was so annoying with how many conveniences were made for the sake of the plot. Characters keep running into each other in public as if they're always in the same neighborhood, while Lena constantly flips between English and Italian without any consistent sense of progression behind her understanding of the Italian language. The diary was the one thing that helped to carry the story long past the lameness of the romances. Its entries almost always parallel with whatever Lena is doing at any given moment, which does add a nice sentiment to the idea of Lena being able to go to Rome with her mother after all, even if it is somewhat cheesy in approach. On a related note, I also have to say that the movie makes fantastic use of its Italian setting. It features a mix of good old-fashioned landmarks and packed streets in Rome, as well as countryside villas and beautiful vistas outside the city. Combined with a wonderful soundtrack, everything adds up to create a warm, romantic atmosphere, which is a shame considering how the actual romances themselves waste their potential. And as I mentioned earlier, the unfolding mystery in the diary behind who Lena's dad is disappointing to say the least. I'm not sure how its presentation here compares to how it's portrayed in the novel, but everything and how it proceeds is somehow both predictable and confusing at the same time. Honestly, the big reveal wouldn't have been as bad if the movie hadn't ended the way it did. Characters come to an unsatisfying realization behind their true purposes, all centering around the most basic message about finding oneself one could possibly tell. There's so little nuance behind a message already so cliched and devoid of meaning that it's almost insulting with how it's presented here. Overall, Love and Gelato is a subpar romantic comedy that puts the bare minimum amount of effort in trying to tell a romantic story set in Italy. If you like love stories set in foreign countries and you don't mind watching something simple in scope, you might enjoy this, but personally I can't stand watching movies like this. It's definitely not the worst romance I've ever seen, but it leaves a lot to be desired. The fact that the love part it emphasizes so much in its title is botched so badly makes me want to drown my sorrows in a bowl of gelato. What did you think about this movie? Are you a fan of simple, easygoing love stories, or do you find them just as irritating as I do? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Love and Gelato. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the American action comedy, The Man from Toronto. Bye bye!